Hola amigos, how are you doing? Hope everyone's having a great Wednesday morning or afternoon. Saludos para todos. And also hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving with their family and friends. Thank you again for joining us on another edition of Hispanic Stars in Tech, our 2021 series. My name is Jesse Martinez. I'm the founder of Latinx Startup Alliance and also your host. This is our weekly series where we bring to you some of the people, tools, and resources that are helping to support our Latinx founders, entrepreneurs, and also our talent. And ultimately, our goal is to connect you to those resources so that you can build a series of long-term relationships as you go through your entrepreneurial and career journey. We also want to thank our dear friends, We're All Human and the Hispanic Star for their continued support. So many gracias to Claudia and her amazing team. And so thank you for allowing us to bring to you this weekly series that we started back in 2020. This morning, we had a little late start here, but I'm excited to have this conversation with a newer friend, but also a more recent LSA champion and part of our Hispanic Star leaders and hub network. And so I want to welcome Edgar, co-founder and CEO of Dree or Dre. How do you pronounce it?
Dree.
Dree. Okay,
Dree,
okay.
yes.
And so, how's it going?
It's going great. Jesse, thank you so much for having me. And yes, good friends. We go way back and LSA champion.
Yes, yes. And so, thank you for being another voice and also an evangelist, right, for Latinos in tech, Latino startups, and also being a Latino tech founder. And
Yep.
so we need many more, as you know,
Yeah.
as well as the capital. But before we start, how's your family doing?
We're all doing well, you know. We been really lucky. All of us have stayed healthy over the last year and a half or so. So pretty thankful for that. I have 4 kids, Jesse. So we're a busy household.
You're busy.
Um, We're having a lot of fun. We're like launching the startup at home with kids and launching a startup outside.
Yeah, yeah,
Having a
no,
good time.
that's great. I think we had a conversation or a few conversations about being a founder and having family,
Yeah.
and especially having some younger ones. And so, uh,
Yeah.
yep, yep. And so, well, awesome. I'm looking forward to sharing your story, your journey, right, with our audience. And one of the things we always like to do is, before you got to this point, tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about your history, your background. And you can go as far back as you like,
Yeah.
and tell us who Edgar is.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say there are a lot of stories like this. But I came to the States when I was 10 years old with my parents. So we moved from Durango, Mexico, to just north of Seattle in a little town called Conway. And just the typical immigrant journey. Parents did what needed to be done to put food on the table and make our way through. I was really lucky though early on. Though we came to the States out of necessity, my dad was an entrepreneur in Mexico for many years. He owned in the early '80s. When the personal computers were kind of booming. He started schools, so like colleges. They were accredited to teach people how to use the personal computer. And so my dad was always an entrepreneur at heart.
Mm-hmm.
So we came to the States. That was really helpful, quite honestly. Both of my parents always saw entrepreneurship as the way out. So my mom in particular had some serious restrictions on my dad as far as the kinds of jobs he could find for us early on, especially my older brother and I. We started working when we were 13 and 14 years old.
Right.
Pretty serious part-time, 25, 30 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my mom made some, they're not going to work in the field, not because not a good job, but because she wanted us to go into a place where we could learn and potentially leverage that in the future,
Right.
more so than like go and get that quick paycheck. And so my dad got us jobs in restaurants, and so we were bussing tables, and for quite a few years. But eventually, my brother and I owned 10 restaurants total between the two of
Wow.
us. And so
Very
it
cool.
did pay off. My mom was right, like most moms.
Yeah. Yep. So
So
it's
she was right in that we did leverage that, and we worked really hard afterward. And we said, we've learned the ropes, and now we got to go do it on our own. So we did that. I did that myself for just under a decade and a half, and had a great time. Was very successful. Started a coffee company as well with some great partners. We were importing green coffee beans from southern Mexico and other Latin American countries,
Okay.
bringing it to the state of Washington, and we were distributing in Washington and the state of California. Went really well. We exited all those businesses successfully, and
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. It was a long journey. It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then, took some time to figure out what we'd learned and how we could leverage that in the future. My brother went his own way, and I decided to come into the tech world, and we launched Dree. So
Yeah. Okay.
uh,
Yeah. No.
that's what is that? 27 years in 1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah. No. That's a super condensed version, and so I completely understand. And so I guess share a little bit about Latinos in Seattle. What was
Yeah,
the reasoning behind that? We're always
yeah.
intrigued, right? How our migration paths are different and why
Yeah.
we choose certain cities versus others.
So there was one of my aunts, Tia Amelia, uh, incredible woman, where essentially every family member that came to the States would go through her house. So she always had room. And that's why we ended up there, is because we were a family of six, four kids, both my parents. She had a room there for us. So that's essentially like that was the pit stop
Okay.
versus anywhere else.
Right.
But, you know, so Jesse, entrepreneurship is busy, and oftentimes um, you don't really have a lot of time for relationships.
Right.
Um, you have to be incredibly selective and hyper focused on what you're doing, and so I was never really engaged too much with the Hispanic community from a networking standpoint. We hired a lot of Hispanics and did everything we could to participate, but it wasn't until I sold my last location that I stepped in and said, "What role do I play? How can I help?" And that came from, as I was selling these locations, I was really lucky to find people in our community, Hispanics, that wouldn't have the opportunity to own a business otherwise. And so when I had that experience of finding people, seeing them grow, that's when my eyes turned and said, "What else can we do?" And that was actually right around the same time that I met Claudia, and I got engaged with We're All Human and eventually Hispanic Star, and then I started going even deeper and participating and building out a network and building relationships in our community.
Yeah, no, I think we've seen a lot of that online, and so thank you for sharing,
Yeah,
that work and being proactive, right, and being able to champion our Latino communities. I want to go back to the restaurants and then also the coffee, and
yeah,
so yeah, so as we know, those are long hours,
they are.
right, and hard work because you're living your passion every day, and
Yeah.
yeah, just the long hours on top of family. Um, so what would you say, what were some of the, I guess, some of the lessons learned, with respect to, those two types of businesses?
Yeah. So with the restaurants, I think the lesson I learned, and this I learned a little bit later, was I didn't have a plan. I didn't go into restaurants because I had this grand scheme to become a, you know, guru in that industry by any means.
Right.
I went into it because I had dropped out of college my freshman year, and I wanted to get married, but I didn't have a good income. And so, typical of, well, I say typical if you knew my dad, that the solution was entrepreneurship, right?
Right. Right.
If all else fails, like, entrepreneurship is the answer.
Mhm.
And so I went into it because of that. So I would say that one of the bigger lessons was, um, develop a plan early, even if you don't have it when you start.
Okay.
Um, and just think about what do you want out of it? I didn't know what I wanted out of it, and I didn't know what I wanted out of it until very late into it. So I would say that that was one. The other, I had a really interesting experience. So as you know, restaurants, you have a lot of staff, and especially if you have larger locations and if you have bars, etc. And I could not figure out for the life of me how to grow my business without growing my team.
Right.
It felt like X amount of revenue was connected to each individual, right?
Mhm.
When I went into the coffee industry, we were a team of three, and we were doing what one restaurant with 15 employees was doing in revenue. And so being able to see that was a big eye opener. And that was actually the early stages of looking outside of the restaurant space. Just knowing that it was about building relationships. You know, we went to Mexico, to Tapachula, Tuxtla Gutierrez, Guatemala, all those areas, and develop relationships with farmers. And because of those relationships, we didn't have to be doing the work. You know, we were able to just connect over a phone call, video call, an email, and a lot of that activity would happen
Mhm.
without having a full team to make it happen. Those were
Yeah.
probably the two things, was just look, you know, again, have a plan or build a plan as soon as possible, even if you don't have it when you start. And then the next one was just dig a little deeper into what product you're building, and there may be opportunities for growth that don't require so much infrastructure.
Mhm. Yeah. No, thank you. Very a couple good
Yeah.
insights and experiences that you had. And so I like, how you were, talking about your a little bit about your journey, right? And then you're like, and then I got into tech. so so let's so, so let's pull that one back a little bit. And so, how did you learn about tech? What was that aha moment? Was it a meetup? What was that introduction like?
Yeah. So with the restaurants and with our coffee company, I was using technology, but existing technology, or just plugging in versus
Mhm.
developing for.
Right.
So I was familiar with technology. I was always curious about it. I always loved how, in the early, what it was, 2009 or so, when the iPad came out, just the impact it had on the revenue or the income our servers were making. There was a big shift from handing a client or a customer a receipt for them to fill out their own tip,
Right.
to having a tablet in front of you that kind of forces you to pick three options. And so you start kind of controlling some of the consumer behavior that happens in your business. I
Mhm.
thought that was really fascinating. And so I was always intrigued by the role technology played. But it wasn't until I was totally out of that industry that I started looking around. But let me tell you, Jesse, it wasn't so much that I was looking for technology. It was that I was doubting that I was good at anything other than restaurants. And so it was this, me going through this stage of, geez, is this all I'm good at? And if so, then this is it. This is all you get to do the rest of your life. You get to build restaurants. And that was really frustrating to me. So as I was engaging with the Hispanic community, I would look at the different things that people in that community were doing. And then from my experience of restaurants and how I leveraged technology to grow my business, I would ask, is there a role for technology here
Right.
to expand the capabilities? And this peer-to-peer marketplace idea was one that I thought, this is it. This has a lot of elements that make sense,
Mhm.
and I can dive into them. But it was this idea that here's a here's like a service job that is common in Latin America, where people are doing laundry
Right.
or your neighbors. Very common. That's not like a breakthrough thing down there. Um, but in the U.S., it doesn't exist. I mean, it does exist, but it doesn't exist at scale. And
Mhm.
so my brain just kind of exploded there and said, "This is where technology uh, comes into play. Is
Right.
there are people that are looking for opportunities, and particularly at-home work opportunities? How can technology make that a possibility for them?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's where it happened. Yeah,
Right. Right. Yeah. We always, that one of those common conversations with founders is, is your venture technology led or technology enabled, and then you have a combination of the two, right? And just trying
Yeah.
to understand the business. And then with the whole explosion of the gig economy, it's opened up
Mhm.
so many
Yeah.
entrepreneurship opportunities, right, for those that just didn't have it before, and also as a means to support yourself and your families.
It is, but Jesse, you know, there's something really interesting. Think about this. When you look at the gig economy, and the reality is that we have to look at the gig economy is primarily ran by companies like Uber, Lyft,
Mhm.
Postmates, DoorDash, etc.
Yep.
It's a high cost of entry.
Hmm.
You have to own a car. That's an expensive asset.
Right.
Oh, it's not even an asset, but that's an expensive purchase to make just to participate in the gig economy. That's one thing. Two is that you have to be out of your house for long periods of time, and it's inconsistent and unpredictable. Today you could do really great on DoorDash, but tomorrow you might not. Tomorrow you might make 30 bucks, come home, be frustrated, right? And so when I looked at that space, I know that that left out the vast majority of the community of Hispanic women that are ready to get engaged in the workforce but lack opportunities or access to it. And gig in reality is one of the best resources that could exist for this particular group. And so we looked at it and we said, okay, well, typically they're single car households, so we can't expect them to have a car. Typically, they have children, so we can't expect them to be out of the house for long periods of time. And typically, they need a little bit more stability. So we can't have this inconsistent, see what happens tomorrow approach. And so we actually tackled that first and built to sustain that model. So to your point that you're making, technology for us incredibly important, but it's a tool versus the leading factor. Eventually, it might transition, but currently, it's we support our operations with technology. But
Right.
yeah, that's how we looked at it. So our model allows people to be home and not be out of the house for long periods of time. They don't have to have a car, and it's consistent and predictable because we're assigning them to members instead of shooting out orders to see who wants to accept it. And there are benefits on both sides of the marketplace for that, by the way. But
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And so maybe we'll just take a step back and share with the audience, what you're building.
that's right. We're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, no,
So
but this is
Dree
fun.
is a peer-to-peer laundry marketplace. So what we do is we connect people that are looking for at-home work opportunities with others that are looking for more time and willing to outsource their laundry. And so that's laundry. The name Dree comes from the word laundry. Um, and that's what we do. We're the platform that manages that connection and communication.
Great. Great. And before we get into the business and how's it
Yeah.
going, I think thus far, thinking about just some of the mentors, right, that have helped you, up to this point, the importance of them, and then also if there's one or two stories that you want to share.
So from mentorship, I have to go all the way back to my restaurants. There were actually two people that stepped into my work life
Mhm.
without me seeking them out. These were actually people that noticed and stepped in. And I'm telling you, like a customer that walked in that was the head of PR at some agency, loved what we were building and came to me and said, "Hey, I'm gonna do your PR for you for a year. I'm not gonna charge you, and I just want you to do well." And so, he not only did that for me, but he would sit and explain how that worked and build relationships with community bloggers and editors and things of that nature. And that individual got us on the Seattle Times. They got us Seattle Weekly, Sunset Magazine. I mean, got us everywhere, all the local blogs, and really was a key
Mhm.
person.
Yep.
The other individual was also a customer. Um, there were actually three people, but very similar experiences. There was also a customer that stepped in and said, "Look, the way you think about your culture and how you intend to highlight it is really unique. And I'd love to help you do that, to make it happen. Eventually, him and I ended up becoming business partners for our coffee company. And
Right.
he's one of the most successful lawyers in Seattle. And I had no reason to go into business with me, no need to go into business with me from my perspective. But um, but he did, and he was willing to bring me into every room that he was going into, and even going to Mexico to build these relationships. His ability to leverage his network was much bigger than I could have imagined. So we were able to sit not only with farmers, but we were also able to be in front of government officials that were really valuable to building this operation. So you know, I would highlight them too early on as probably the most impactful. Today, my approach to it is beyond a board of advisors, as an example, or an advisory board. It's more the people you choose to spend time with.
Mhm.
So Jesse, you're obviously one of them, where I've been back and forth on emails, on text, on LinkedIn messages, on video calls, and it's really honestly to me today, it's people like you that are outside of your day to day, but have a big view of what's happening in this space, and then also are very willing. You've done the same thing for me of saying, hey, you're doing this, I need to connect you with this person, and you're doing this, I need to connect you with this. And there's a something unique that I've noticed anyway is there's a difference between a mentor per se and a sponsor. And one of the things that I've appreciated whenever people like you have made introductions is that you're going in there vouching for me. You're not just saying, hey, I thought you should meet Edgar. You're saying like, hey, Edgar's a great friend, he's kicking butt, vouch for him, you need to set up a meeting. And all of a sudden there's just like this additional leverage that you have wherever you go when people do take that approach. So I would
Yeah.
say that from today, that's more or less what I value, um, and what I'm really appreciative and looking for all the time.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it. And I know you do the same.
yeah,
And so I know you're doing the same across the board. And, we need to continue to do that and then multiply it, right? So
yeah.
that we can, again,
Gotta
on
spread it.
that thesis that we've always, spoken about in a number of conversations around wealth and prosperity for a Latino
Yeah,
community. And so we need to make those
yes.
calls. We need to make those intros
Mhm.
and champion
Yeah,
one another. And that's what the
yes,
star, right? And we're all human has represented and has been, for me,
yes.
for you, and others. And so the
Yeah,
journey,
it is a
journey
Yeah, the
continues.
journey continues. I mean, it is a space. It's about, there's plenty for everyone. This is not there's no room for scarcity mentality, and it's not that difficult to help. Um, you know,
Yeah, no, I
it
agree.
really isn't. It's not difficult to open doors.
Yeah. And, thank you for sharing those beautiful stories around just mentors that came into your life, without asking, right? It just happened organically. But, they saw something, and, that's what,
Yeah,
we encourage others to do. Be that mentor, be that
yeah,
sponsor, be that champion, be that advisor, and then more
it's
and more,
huge.
yeah, the more and more we're talking about, our personal advisory board, right, in addition to board of directors.
Hmm.
And so it's something that we need to continue to evangelize uh,
Yeah,
within our Latino community. And so, um,
I agree. I mean, it's one of the things we lack. We really do lack that, and I think it's um, it's something that's been there for a long time. I mean, what's interesting to me or fascinating is that we always have someone who's willing to recommend a good mechanic, right?
right,
Like all of us have that. Busco un mecánico, and somebody is like, "Oh, I know this guy," and I think that that goes to show that we really are capable of making these connections.
right,
It's just being able to take that attitude in every other aspect of our lives because we do it already, right? If
yep,
I'm looking for a good panaderia, guaranteed there are 5 to 10 people that are willing to tell me where to go,
right,
right? And then or tamales or whatever it is you're looking for. That you can find someone who's going to recommend somebody that's really good. We just need to replicate that in a lot of the other spaces. And I think, I think that's there are people like you and platforms like Hispanic Star that are built for that.
Right, right. Yeah, we just need to amplify it upstream,
Yep, I
right?
agree.
Yeah, and I think we're all doing that, and that's part of the mission that we're all supporting,
Yeah.
championing. And so, tell us about your aha moment with Dree, right? And like, okay, you know, this is what I want to do. And so maybe walk us
Yeah.
through those early days.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is probably fairly cliche, but I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And you know that as an entrepreneur, you have to be fairly aggressive and vicious with your goals. um, so for me, I'm an activator in that sense, and so for me, when it clicked, it was the next day was go to work, and it was just very aggressively chasing what does day one look like for us, like what is a how do we get that first customer? How do we start getting feedback? And we dedicated about 6 months to just doing private testing, getting feedback, and then another 6 months to gathering data at scale of what was happening in this space and how people felt about this. And so we approached it sort of in a let's gather data and then let's go and prove if that data is true, um, and then start building based on customer feedback
Mhm.
and how they want to interact with a product like this. So we're very customer led on this approach. But yeah, no, my mindset was just very aggressive. I um, I was sort of I was the individual that said either we're going to work together or we're going to compete. That's kind of how my brain works in my early stages. So just really intense, to be honest.
Okay.
Nothing gets
Yeah.
in the way type of mentality. I don't know how to like describe that gently, how to like explain that gently, but that's just there are seasons for all things, and for me,
Right.
the first 6 to 12 months of a business, it's um, I mean, you're a bullet basically.
Yeah. You have to be. Well, the status, right? Within a couple of years, the business will fail.
Yeah, yeah.
So and
What is
so
it? 96%? Ugh,
it's really high.
something high. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so yeah, so I mean, you have to do whatever you need to
Yeah.
do, right? The
And
term
it's
I've heard is bulldog. Oh, you're that bulldog, right? Because you just won't let go. So,
yeah. But it's the same see in restaurants. It's like 86% of restaurants fail within the first 3 or 5 years, something intense.
yeah,
And so for me to survive in that space, being someone without, any financial backing early on, or big business experience, I had to have that mindset. And so I think it was just natural for me to take that and apply it to whatever it is that I do. I mean, honestly, and that doesn't mean you don't take care of people or that you run over people to get to where you need to get, but it does mean that you're not going to allow people or things or circumstances to get in the way.
that is true. We always hear about the naysayers, and
Yeah.
so
Oh
so
yeah.
make sure that you find your tribe, right, and surround yourself and immerse yourself with your tribe that can
Yeah.
be there for support
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
validation
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah.
And so,
And that, I mean, that goes to the point that we were making earlier. It's just being really selective of that tribe, of that community that you build, because every voice that you hear matters, because it carries power with it,
mhm,
either for good or for bad. And so that is really a key thing early on. So I made a very conscious decision to leave the state of Washington when I decided to launch Dream. And one of the reasons I did that was because I knew that I had to build a new network, a new community of people
mhm,
that would add value to the business I was building now, versus the people that were there for me when I was building the restaurants, because
right,
it's just a totally different space. And so I moved to Utah, to Lehigh, which is the heart of the tech movement that's happening in the state of Utah, which is incredible. And I
mhm,
was very intentional about that. I was intentional about moving to Utah because I knew that our product needed to be tested by people that were very forgiving.
Mhm.
And as we did research, this area was just very reflective of the community we were after. And so
Right.
it does really matter, those decisions you make, where you go, where you build, because you'll be surrounded by positive or negative influence
Yeah,
in
well,
every aspect. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, you've spoken about networks, the power, right, behind relationships,
Mhm.
and then data, right, customer data, customer validation,
Yeah.
then having an MVP, right, that minimum viable
Mhm.
product or your pilot, whatever you choose to call it, and then traction, right? And so traction, I'm sure was a keyword you've heard many times, and you'll continue to hear as fundraise for the startup, right? And so
Yeah.
traction is so important, along with revenue, right?
Yeah.
Demonstrate that you can actually generate revenue,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
then ultimately, how does it scale, right? How does
Yeah.
it scale over time?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, that's what we've been doing here. We were lucky to hit the ground running, and it was a sticky product. The experience is really sticky. So our own customers just started spreading the word, and we started building, and we are still in the process of building different things that will help them more easily,
Mhm.
um, help us grow. So they play a huge role in that.
Yeah.
We just closed our pre-seed round a week ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Very excited about that. Um, so we're excited. We're bringing people on. We just brought on additional developers, customer support, success, marketing, sales, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, so we're pretty excited about that. Everything, Jesse, I've been really lucky. My I love my background, right? I love that I'm an immigrant a lot. I love it a lot. It was painful as a kid coming to the States and having a less than ideal experience, but um, I'm 37 years old, and it's a lot easier now to look back and recognize the tissue and the resilience that those tough experiences built or helped me develop.
Right. Right.
And so now I really genuinely think that I would not have been I would not have been successful if I wasn't an immigrant. And I would not be successful in what we're doing right now with Dree if I wasn't and had not had my immigrant experience or journey. I really couldn't. Honest, if it wasn't for that, I just wouldn't be able to do it. And it's because of a lot of what we learned. It's about understanding the needs of the community you serve and being compassionate, empathetic about it, but also being aggressive in developing what needs to be developed in order to support that community. But yeah, I honestly like, if someone was to evaluate me and they were like, "What is it? Why is this guy intense? Why is this guy
Yeah.
like? Why is this work? Why is it working out?" I can guarantee that they'll point back to when I was 10 to 16 years old, and they'll know that that's where the magic happened.
Right. Right. Well, we'll have to create those T-shirts, right? Immigrant powered.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, right?
So I'm
Good.
not wearing it today, but typically I wear one of two shirts.
Okay.
It's either a shirt that says immigrant or a shirt with the logo of Dree. And that's usually my,
Your go-to wardrobe.
yeah, I have about 10 of each, and that's,
Nice.
they're not approved by my wife because she says I don't have a taste in style, but
Well, you're looking good today.
she dressed me. No, I'm kidding.
It's okay. You're going on camera.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, no, I mean, we have so many beautiful immigrant stories, right?
yeah,
And that's what our country's made of. And so we
yeah,
just need to continue to tell them,
yeah,
right, and share those, and then create more role models so that the younger generation can see us, right,
yeah,
across the U.S. Uh, Tell us a little bit about fundraising, because
yeah,
I know, we have a number of founders that usually join us, and
yep.
early stage founders, right, pre-seed, seed, and so well, before you start there, how long have you been working on Dree, and then how big is the team today?
So we started doing our sort of like diving into the research about 2 years ago, but we actually launched public beta in March of this year. So we did a lot of learning before we launched.
Right.
But yeah, the team is growing. So we just brought on three developers. So we have four developers now, and there are eight of us in, I guess, what you could say the office team.
Okay.
Um, but we're hiring for a bunch of new roles. Um, it was a team of three for a really long time. It was a team of three until we decided to raise.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. I
but
think
yeah, no, fundraising was really interesting. We're a mission driven company and we're people driven. But what I found most interesting about fundraising was um, being able to do that mind shift and understanding that you're not selling to your customer,
right.
um, that you're selling to people that are interested in the economics, the opportunity, and why you believe you're the right person or the right team to make it happen. Because you're kind of going in there and saying, "Hey, this is a $26 billion space, and here's how we think it should happen, and here's why we're the people to make it happen." That has nothing to do with your mission or, I mean, zero.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, and the other one that I hear quite often is like, and then why now?
yeah, why now?
Right. And so,
Exactly. And so that was probably the early on, that was a little bit tough for me to transition because, for the longest time, I go and fall in love with our consumer and their needs and developing what you said earlier, the MVP to deliver to them and then say, "Hey, what do you think? Give us some feedback." And then we modify and grow. You fall so deep into it. And then all of a sudden you have to forget about it, you know?
yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have to forget about the one thing you just fell in love with, and that was interesting. But I think when there was a shift in fundraising when I understood that I had this moment in the process, and this was with one of my mentors, and he said, "Look, man, you're gonna be successful, and you need to understand that." And so the question you have to ask yourself is, who do you need in order to make that a reality? And then my brain just was like, oh, okay, I need to start being a little bit more thoughtful about the people we bring into our company, not just from a team standpoint, but from an investor standpoint.
Yeah.
Do we align? Will they be there for the long run? Do you need them for the long run? Do you need them just short term? What do you really need from them? And then once that shift happened, things started moving a lot faster.
Mhm.
You know, and I never counted. A lot of founders, I hear founders like, "Oh, I pitched to 157 people." Like,
Yeah.
no, yeah. I didn't do that because I felt like you kind of started getting romantic about that process when it's really not a romantic process. It's a get it done process. Um,
Right. Right.
so,
Yeah. There's different views and takes on that, right? The 99 no's and the one yes,
mhm,
right? And
yeah,
how many doors did you knock on?
yeah,
But then also understanding your investors. And so I think that's one of the pitfalls of founders is they don't do the research,
yeah.
enough research on the investors to understand if they're actually aligned.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
where,
it's really easy to fall into that trap because, you're looking, you're raising I don't know, come up with a number. Let's say you're raising 2 million and somebody's in front of you that could potentially write 1.5 million of that. You can really quickly forget about values. You can forget about theses and other things because
yeah,
it's a tempting thing.
yep, it is. And you have to think about, well, you have to think long term, right? Because,
Mhm.
are they there for the right reasons and will they support you? And
Yeah.
ultimately, you want to keep control. And so,
Yeah. For how long? I mean, there's a lot of questions. How long do you need to be in control?
Mhm.
Um, and then, for me, it was really all about because I am very driven by the mission, by the people, was how long do I need to be leading the effort in order for that to be at the soul of this company. Um, but there's so many things, because you do have to have long-term vision, but also understand that you have a job to be done right now.
Exactly, exactly. And so I know, with a lot of startups, it's always challenging to have, that CTO or that initial
Mhm,
set of developers. And so you mentioned developers a couple of times,
mhm.
how have you been finding yours? Where are they located? Because,
Yeah,
with more around remote work, there's more acceptance
yeah,
around where they are, and
yeah,
they no longer have to be in the same building with you, in
yeah.
the same office. And so,
So my thought on that is, so my co-founder is a CTO, and my thought on this is that for us, we need to have the CTO present
mhm,
and essentially, not only lead the effort, but audit the effort. And so for me, it's really important that whoever is leading tech is um, close, very close. But we have a mixture of office and remote team.
mhm,
For me, it comes down to, is the person leading the effort present? Is the person auditing the effort present? That matters more to me than if everybody else is in the office. I don't think anybody else needs to be there. I think the people leading the effort should be there.
right.
Uh, at the very minimum, our schedule, the way we set it up, is that Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays are office days. Friday is you get to choose, and then that's essentially it. And so we have our bigger communication happens on Mondays or Wednesdays.
Mhm.
But it's really all about, it's a different world. I'll tell you what. It's just about getting the job done right.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
and so
agree.
that's the focus. It's not difficult to evaluate whether the work is getting done, if you're working remote or if you're working in the office. I mean,
Mhm.
those measurables are pretty clear.
Yeah, I agree. And so, yeah, I mean, the world is changing, right? Work is changing,
Mhm.
habits, all the above. And so we're not done yet. But in terms of developers, how do you find them, right? And then
Yeah.
are they in-house, outsourced? That was
Yeah.
part of one of the questions that popped up.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That
So
came.
so it's a combination of, we have some in-house, and then we do have two that are outsourced. Um, we so my co-founder has been in tech leading teams for 11 years, and so we leveraged his network
Mhm. Okay.
to find, yeah. So we actually didn't have a hard time at all. Um, I think I was very intentional when I sought him out early on, in that beyond his capacity and ability to code and release product, that he had a good network for when we ran into this time, um, that he already had names in mind. I mean, he's had names in mind for 6, 8 months already.
Yeah.
So it was just he was already building those relationships. He had already introduced me to them, and it was a you know, hey, we're ready to go. And so yeah, I mean, that's been our approach. I know it sounds super simple and easy, but it was more just the intention and the just the focus early on of bringing in the co-founder that not only knew how to code, but that could lead the
Hmm.
department. And
Yeah.
leading a department means recruiting people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I think that's standing out for me just in this conversation and thinking about other founders is just being thoughtful
Mm.
across everything that you're doing, right? Thoughtful and strategic, and that you're planting the seeds uh, as you want to do and build something.
Yeah.
Right. So there's these stepping stones and building blocks,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not just jumping in, right?
Yeah.
Head first or feet first. It's okay, what did I do to actually get to this point?
Yeah.
Which then ties back into timing. Is the timing right?
So a lot of the time, so I've worked with small business owners, and I've been a small business owner myself. The messaging oftentimes in that space is just do it. Like, just go for it. Whether you know or not, just go for it. And I get the sentiment, but it's really the wrong piece of advice, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that you've got to go into it with a little more awareness. Uh,
Hmm.
I think it's, you don't want to end up a failure because of you uh, not thinking through some of the processes. I I think that if you have the opportunity, you should take the time to find your North Star and then work backwards. So I have a great friend um, and mentor that sat with me several times, and we built what would be a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan, and a 1-year plan with a ton of flexibility because it changes all the time. But
Yeah.
essentially, it was like a big vision. And so as you start working backwards, you start connecting the decisions you need to make in year one to get you to year five, and then the decisions in that process to get you to year 10. And so there's definitely a lot of thoughtfulness, that a lot of, yeah, a lot of thinking about where you're going early on. That's why I said, if you one of the lessons I learned with the restaurants was, if you don't have a plan yet of where you're going, do it now.
Right.
Before you go and find one more customer, just do that now to see if it makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's already such a high risk of failure.
Hmm.
And so if the risk is there, then you know,
Yeah. How do you
be
minimize?
wise.
How do you
Yeah.
minimize it or de-risk it? Right? As the
Yeah.
investor would say, how do you de-risk it?
Because, well, it doesn't take a whole, I mean, it takes time and effort, but um, it's not expensive. I'll tell you, I have a great friend that was looking to open up a coffee shop for moms. So she wanted to do a Starbucks with a play area with supervision, so moms could still hang out at Starbucks,
Yeah.
but then their kids could be playing. Anyway, I said to her, "Look, where do you think these moms hang out? Where do you think they shop?" And she told me, oh, they go here, here, there. I was like, okay, go and talk to 100 of them. And don't come back and don't even think about this business unless you get to 100 people that are excited about your idea. And so she did, with a clipboard in hand,
Yeah.
went to Target, went to Fred Meyer, went to all these little shops that she believed they spent time at, and she stopped these women and said, "Hey, can I just tell you for 5 seconds this idea that I have, and then love if you could tell me if it's a good or bad idea." And she went and did it. And what did it cost her? Do you know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
great.
But
Yeah.
what did it save her?
Yeah. Yeah. And what are the insights, right, that she gleaned from that data, right?
Exactly. And so then it makes a difference on making decisions of, do I pay this much for this lease here?
Yeah.
Or can I go 2 miles away and pay less, but then I'm going to have to spend it on bringing the customer 2 miles further? And so being able to do that preliminary work
Hmm.
can be a huge savior in the future. And in every aspect, even in technology, my CTO and I, we talk a lot about that. So, we're, um, a year and a half or so, or just over a year and a half into building, and we have no tech debt.
Yeah.
That's pretty great for me and for him. Um, but it's because we take that approach.
Right. Yeah. No, great advice. And you just remind me of our good old friend Steve Blank, right? Customer development, get out of the building, and that's what he preached. And it was all about
Yeah.
going and talking to your customers and gathering that data to determine
Yeah.
if it
Yeah.
validates or invalidates your set of hypotheses, based
Yeah.
on your assumptions, and then you just continue to iterate on that until you
Yeah.
find something that, okay, this is the top things that we can gather from where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we had a
Um,
question come in. Hello, Viviana. Can you share your top three technical pieces of advice for fundraising?
so number one, don't take it personal. um, Number two is, I think that more than a few people told me that it was five things that investors look for. It's the idea, it's the size of the market, people, people, people. and being able to be okay with that, of understanding that you're going to have to set aside all of your emotions and your connection to your project and really be able to deliver a compelling story as far as the opportunity and why you and your team are the right people. um, that could change everything for you. And then lastly, one of my mentors, a few weeks back, said you really need to analyze your experience and make a decision on which pieces of your experience you need to leverage when you're pitching. Because not every investor is going to understand that building a chain of restaurants is difficult, or that it's heavily led by operations. They might not know that, but it might make more sense for them that you built the supply chain from Latin America to the US with your coffee company. So really being able to understand
Right.
which pieces of your background are valuable at the right time. Um, and
Mhm.
for your team as well, not just you, but your team. So I would say
Right.
that those three things would be the most uh, valuable that I could share right now.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And so for 2022, what's new? What
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
What
look, our long-term goal, and that we want to accomplish as quickly as possible, is to be the first national brand that handles laundry. When you're in Miami or when you're in Austin and somebody says, "Oh, I'm so sick of laundry," that dree is the thing that comes up. There's not a market leader right now. There are people that are in the space
Mhm.
that have different approach. Um, we want to we want to be the first to scale.
Right.
So you'll see us with, starting in the next, I would say within the next 6 months, you'll see us present in several states. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And then how can we help? How can the audience help? What can they do to support you, Dree, the
Well,
merchant?
that's a great question. Just spreading the word, I think, is a big deal for us. Being able to reach as many people as possible, and then feedback. We love feedback. Any idea, any thought that comes, shoot an email or send us a message. That would be great. Yeah.
Cool. And then what's the best way for people to connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Edgar Carreon, or email edgar@dreenow.com.
And that's DREE.
EENOW.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right, Jesse.
if you have any final questions, audience, please put it in as we wrap up here. I want to be respectful of
Yeah.
Edgar's time because he's a busy founder.
I do have to run to my next meeting, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate you inviting me and having me here.
Likewise, I
It's always
appreciate you
great to
joining.
connect with the community.
Yeah. And so from one proud Hispanic star to another, thank you again for your time,
Thank
your
you.
insights, for sharing your journey, for
Thank you.
sharing, pieces of advice, and for your, commitment to,
Just one
from a
second.
mission and social perspective,
Yeah.
then also just helping to support and empower Latino community. And
Thank
also
you so
big
much,
gracias
Jesse.
to Claudia and her amazing team again for allowing us to bring this
Yeah.
series to you, Hispanic Stars in Tech 2021. And then if you don't know, we have our Hispanic Leadership Summit next week, Tuesday and
Yeah.
Wednesday. So go to hispanicstar.org. Make sure you register. There's going to be a virtual sessions, I should say. So make sure you look that up and get your